In 2023, in a town called Leongatha in Victoria, Australia, Erin Patterson made a beautiful lunch for 4 lunch guests who had no idea that their lives were going to get absolutely wrecked within the next 24 hours. This is the case of the mushroom murders. Hi, my name's Yasmin and I make videos about true crime, paranormal events, or just scary events in general. If you'd like, then please subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. If you're a returning viewer, then hi, welcome back. Thank you for clicking on the video. I have been away for a whole year, almost, I think. If you're interested as to why I've been away, you can watch at the very end of the video. I will have a little explanation. But yeah, let's get started. Erin and Simon Patterson met in the early 2000s and they met through work in Melbourne, Australia. They were both working for the Monash City Council at the time, but before they met each other, they'd both attended university. So Simon studied to become a civil engineer and Erin had studied air traffic control. So they were very well-educated individuals, they were intelligent, and this is why they were sort of drawn to each other in the first place. In 2007, they ended up getting married and eventually went on to have 2 children, 1 girl and 1 boy. And although their relationship seemed happy from the outside and everyone seemed like everything was peachy, they were really unhappy, particularly Erin. So Erin always struggled with self-esteem issues and binge eating, which added a lot of strain onto their relationship. And they were already bickering quite a lot, and it just made everything a lot worse, essentially. They'd go through this toxic cycle of separating, then getting back together, separating, getting back together, and in 2015, Simon kind of had enough of this. He filed for his tax return, and on his tax return, he said that he was separated, and this was the first time that it was ever officially written somewhere, and it really bothered Erin. But regardless, Erin still kept in contact with Simon's parents. So Simon's parents' names were Donald, or Don, and Gail Patterson. She had a really good relationship with Simon's parents. The reason being is they were also very intellectual people, and particularly Don would always talk about books and scientific concepts with Erin, which piqued her interest. And even though her and Simon ended up being on non-speaking terms, apart from about their kids, she would still contact Don quite regularly and they would just spend some time together. Around comes 2019, so peak of COVID, or like just when COVID's starting, and Erin was feeling a little bit lost, okay? So her marriage had fallen apart, she was feeling a bit lonely, so she decided to join a true crime Facebook page. And on that page, she connected with 4 other group members, and they formed this Facebook chat. And the Facebook chat was mainly to discuss a certain true crime case, but in this, they would also share aspects of their personal lives. For example, Erin mentioned that her husband was very controlling and that she quite often painted him in a negative light, saying that she didn't really feel comfortable leaving her kids around him. Intermingled with all of this, they would also share some random recipes with each other. And at this stage, Erin was developing a real interest for cooking a little bit more, and she also wanted to start foraging for mushrooms randomly. Her aim was to dehydrate these mushrooms so that she could sort of build up a stock and use them in various different recipes. And one of the things she shared on this group chat that she was super excited about was the fact that she had bought this new dehydrator. And at this point, Erin was all about trying new recipes, and a beef Wellington recipe by Recipe Tin Eats really piqued her interest. And of course, she let the group chat know that she was about to try it. Erin started to prep for this beef Wellington meal. So basically a beef Wellington is like a steak with a mushroom coating and it's crusted on the outside with puffy pastry. It actually looks delicious. but it does take a number of hours slaving away in the kitchen and a lot of prep work. So she wanted to get it right by just buying the right meat and also buying a little stock of mushrooms from the Asian grocer. She thought that if she is going to make such a hardcore meal, she wants to invite some people round to her house. But not just for the beef Wellington, she also had a very important announcement to make. So, one Sunday at church, she invited her mother-in-law and father-in-law, so Gail and Don, over, as well as Simon's aunt and uncle, so Heather and Ian Wilkinson, which was really random because she never really spoke to Heather and Ian that much, like they were never really that close. But regardless, everyone agreed to come over for lunch. She also texted Simon saying that she wants him to come too, but he texted and replied saying he didn't really feel that comfortable. They weren't on speaking terms. It was just a little bit awkward, so why was he not going to come to lunch? She did also mention that she was going to do her announcement at the lunch, but he didn't really care. On the 29th of July 2023, the 4 guests arrived, and this was Don, Gail, Ian and Heather, and they all came to her Leongatha house, which is located in regional Victoria. Erin had prepared everything that day, and she served this beautiful beef Wellington on large grey plates with a side of green salad and mashed potato. And although this was a formal-ish lunch, she'd never actually hosted anything like this before, so she didn't have enough of those plates. So for herself, she ended up serving the same thing, but just on a smaller scale, on a brown little plate. Gail wasn't really able to finish her whole portion, so her husband ate it for her, and Erin couldn't really finish her meal because she was so emotional and worked up about what she was going to talk about, and that was the fact that she had cancer. And that Simon already knew about this, but her kids didn't, and she just wanted some advice as to whether she should tell them in the first place or if she should keep it a secret, which is just, I don't know, I feel like that's a weird idea. They all agreed that she should tell her children, so they prayed about it with her, and that sort of came to an end after Erin was comforted. She ended up serving some orange cake, they all ate the cake, and went home. That was the end of the lunch. But nothing could have prepared this group of people for what was going to transpire in the next 24 hours. On the 30th of July, so the very next day, Erin served some of the lunch to her children as well, just the leftovers, and they just went about their day. But later on in the afternoon, Erin started to feel a little bit queasy, like stomach-wise. She was just not feeling a little bit off, but she kept brushing it off. And at this time, the 4 lunch guests were also showing signs of food poisoning, but it was a bit unusual because as the hours went by, their food poisoning just got worse and worse and worse, so much so that they got admitted to hospital that day. But in hospital, again, they were just deteriorating, so much so that they actually got transported to a bigger hospital with more facilities to be admitted into intensive care. As this was all going on, Erin was also progressively becoming more unwell, to the point where she thought she needed to go to hospital. So she ended up calling Simon to ask if he could take her, but he kind of just said, "No, I'm not taking you." But Erin found another way to get to hospital. She got to hospital, got admitted, and she looked sick, she was acting sick, but declined most of the examinations that were offered by the doctors. And she said she was just going to leave and walked out of the hospital, only to come back to hospital the next morning saying that she was still quite unwell and that it was getting slightly worse. But this time she did let the doctor examine her, and Erin was perfectly fine. There was no need for her to stay in hospital, so she just got discharged at midday. On the other hand, Gail, Don and Heather are just getting sicker by the hour, but Ian's situation showed some promising improvements, even though he was still very unwell. It was a good sign. But by this stage, the doctors had diagnosed all 4 patients with poisoning, specifically death cap mushroom poisoning. So what is a death cap mushroom? It's basically a poisonous mushroom that grows in a variety of different places. They grow very well in Victoria and Australia, and if you consume one of these mushrooms by accident, you usually get sick about 6 to 24 hours after. You get like food poisoning like symptoms, But if people don't get medical intervention quite quickly, it can lead to liver failure, which ultimately leads to organ failure and death, worst case scenario, but is very likely to happen. I have to check this, but I think death cap mushrooms are the main mushroom that poisons people worldwide. Unfortunately, this was the fate of Gail, Don, and Heather. Gail and Heather died on the 4th of August. Don died on the 5th of August after days of fighting to stay alive. Ian was the only one who seemed to show any signs of recovery. He was in intensive care and he was in an induced coma. By some sort of miracle, on the 11th of August, he was actually moved into a rehabilitation ward and he ended up having a full recovery and was discharged 2 months later. The Department of Health started to get a little bit suspicious and they questioned Erin as to where she found these mushrooms in the first place, and Erin just explained to them she got them from an Asian grocer. But this was a huge public health concern, obviously, because death cap mushrooms should never be sold commercially for obvious reasons. The Asian grocers were all checked in the area and none of these mushrooms were found to come back as death cap mushrooms. They were all safe for consumption, and this was one of the many lies that Erin had told. Firstly, death cap mushrooms don't grow in China, so there's no way that they could have been imported into Australia. She said she got dried ones. And secondly, no one else in Victoria had been hospitalized for mushroom poisoning recently. So how come she was the only one to buy this poisonous batch? The story just made no sense, essentially. And after pushing Erin a little bit harder, she admitted that she actually used a combination of store-bought mushrooms and foraged mushrooms, but had no idea that they were poisonous. It was just a complete accident. Police obtained a search warrant for her house and her phone, and at the same time she was taken to the local police station for further questioning. And I don't know how this is even possible, but while she was at the police station, she tried to perform a factory reset on her phone, but it failed, and police were able to access a whole gold mine of incriminating information. Weeks before she was planning this lunch, Erin made multiple visits to a website called iNaturalist.org. It's basically a website where the public can post information about plants and animals in the nearby area. They can make like an interesting post, or they can make a post warning the public. And there was one specific post that warned the public against the presence of death cap mushrooms in 2 specific areas. And these areas were Loch and Outram, areas that are very close to where Erin lives. She just so happened to visit both of these places, and the way they know this is because her cell phone signal was picked up at both of these locations. Not only that, but on her phone they found the group chat of the True Crime Facebook page where Erin shared photos of her dehydrator, which just happened to not be in the house when police were searching for it. This is because when Erin first started getting questioned by the Department of Health, she felt like they were going to think that she did this on purpose. So the first thing she did was she took her dehydrator straight to the landfill, which was all caught on CCTV. The dehydrator was later recovered, and it was definitely hers. It had her fingerprints on the outside. It's exactly like a match to the photo that she sent her friends. But also the trays inside the dehydrator had traces of death cap mushroom. On November 2nd, 2023, police arrested Erin on the charge of 3 counts of murder. She had remained in custody until her trial, which recently took place. And during the trial, they revealed more details, including the fact that her medical records had been accessed and there was no evidence that Erin ever had cancer in the first place. She took a cervical smear test weeks, months before the lunch, and it came back as negative. So she fabricated this story so that people would come to her lunch, and she just made up this elaborate lie. I guess this begs the question as to why she didn't get sick and why her kids never got sick. And Ian Wilkinson, being the sole survivor of the lunch, remembered that odd detail that Erin served herself that smaller portion of the brown or tan coloured plate. and they got the larger plates. So he sort of dwelled on that, and they came to the conclusion that she must have consumed less of the toxin in the mushrooms. But on top of this, Erin added another detail during her trial where she mentioned that she ate some orange cake after the guests had left, but she didn't stop eating the orange cake. She kept going and going and going until she ate 2/3 of the cake, and then she felt sick and vomited it back up. So in a sense, by doing that, she's also releasing the toxin. So technically she gets less and she gets sick to a lesser degree. Now, the really weird thing about this case, I mean, there's lots of weird things about this case, but the one main thing is she has no motive to do it. Why would she have done this? As of the 7th of July, so a couple of days ago, Erin was found guilty of murdering her lunch guest. She hasn't been sentenced yet, but once she does get sentenced, I'll post a little update in the comments maybe. That was the mushroom murder case. I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the story. And very quickly, I'll just get into why I was away for a year. As you may or may not know, I did make a small comment about it in one of my previous videos, not the last video though, just saying that I was going to go on maternity leave. We have had a new addition to the family, a little baby boy. He is 10 months old now. And we had a lot of life changes. So we had to sell our house in New Zealand, which was very stressful. And then we quit our jobs and we've moved to Australia. Granted, not where Erin Patterson lives, but we moved to Queensland, and specifically Hervey Bay, which is a small, like, little beach town. Very beautiful, but yeah, we've had a very big life change in basically all aspects of our life. And it's only just now that things have started to really settle down and for us to develop this routine. This is the first time that the room behind me has had no cardboard boxes in it. Everywhere else still has cardboard boxes. So we're still unpacking, even though like it's halfway through the year, but whatever, it takes ages. I will be consistent from here on out unless we get some sort of family sickness. But yeah, I'm going to try and post every single week like I was doing before, and I'm not going to have a year-long hiatus again. Hopefully not. Thank you so much for watching again, and I will see you next week.